share that with you too. We'd love to go around the room and kind of introduce ourselves and kind of maybe how we learned about Plaster Sustain and what your knowledge is about working landscapes would be kind of helpful. And also just to say that we have 4 speakers this evening. We'll have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. So for a fairly informal group, as you know, actually I'm just going to read you our mission. So Plaster Sustain connects people and inspires collaboration to build healthy communities and thriving local economies. So that's it. Our 2 key verbs here are connecting and inspiring. So we want to showcase the great projects that are already going on in our community and hopefully get more people to get on board in creating a more sustainable Placer County. So with that, Stan, would you like to start with our introductions?
Okay, my name is Stan Nader. I'm a board member of Placer Sustain in Lincoln City Council. And I found out about Plaster Sustain by attending the summit.
Okay. Mark?
My name is Mark Betcher. I'm also on the board, and I've known about Plaster Sustain for about 3 years now, and I know nothing about this topic, so I'm excited to learn.
Excellent. Good.
Elisa Noble with Placer County Resource Conservation District, and my working landscapes background comes primarily from having worked for California Farm Bureau for 7 years. Prior to that, I've been in my current role about a year, so, and there's all kinds of things we can do with that and through the RCD, so happy to be here.
Great, and thank you for sharing your knowledge.
I'm Marilyn Jasper. I'm active with Clover Valley Foundation and the Sierra Club. And I actually, when Jeff kind of was organizing this, how many years ago?
3 or 4,
3
yeah.
or 4. I used to come to the meetings and then got sidetracked with some other obligations. So I heard about this and wanted to be here.
Great. Thank you. Welcome.
Jim Hawkinsmith, Placer Land Trust Board, and I've heard about you guys for a long time and thought I would show up and see what's going on.
Excellent. Welcome.
I'm Rebecca Lillis. I work for Placer County. I'm interested in the sustainable Placer County movement. Used to work for the Trust for Public Land right out of college. I found out about the work of this group from Jeff a couple years ago. He was coming to meetings with Placer County. We were working on the Placer Green Business Program to promote sustainable businesses in the county. And just have had these meetings on my calendar every time I get an email, and there's always a conflict, whether it's school sports or something else. So finally,
So glad you
just learn more about what's going on and how to get involved.
Great.
I'm Kathy Hawkinsmith, and I'm on the Placer Land Trust Community Council.
Oh, great.
And I think the one other time I had an interaction with Placer Sustain was at Natural Trading Company. Was there a potluck?
We did.
Actually, was that CSA?
Placer
for
Local
years.
Food Alliance, and that was one of our offshoot groups.
Yeah.
It sort of concepts what we do is we convene people so that they can then create their own projects around sustainability. So that was mostly about agriculture and farming.
I'm Bob Kingman with the Sierra Nevada Conservancy, right across the parking lot. I've been working in sustainable working landscapes since I came to the Conservancy about 10 years ago. And that's all of my experience has been with relationship to the Conservancy, the state agency doing that work. I became familiar with Placer Sustain several years ago, and then actually had an opportunity last year to work with several folks on the Gold Country Prosperity Summit and help sponsor that.
Great.
I'm Joe Looney, on the board of Placer Sustain. I think I heard about it about 3 years ago from probably an ad in the paper, and dropped into a meeting, and took about 6 months to a year, but then got more involved and started attending more meetings and became a board member. Really interested in the concept of working landscapes from the perspective of the triple bottom line in particular, and just want to hear a lot more about that tonight.
And we shall. So, Jeff, want to introduce yourself and let us know what you're doing.
I am the cameraman. My name's Jeff Bordelon, and I'm one of the original organizers of Placer Sustain, and I'm thrilled that you're all here tonight. This is exactly what we do, and I appreciate the energy and the magic that happens when people in our community come together and talk about things that are essential to our future. So.
And before Justin actually starts with his presentation, I'll give a brief introduction of him myself. I also just wanted to I know that Lisa's been working on the California Economic Summit Functional Committee for Working Landscapes, as am I. The one thing that I did, we all made commitments when we actually went to Los Angeles and attended the summit itself. And one of the commitments that I made for Placer Sustain was to actually increase the knowledge base of what working landscapes are. So I kind of like spearheaded this particular thing because the whole goal is to start videotaping actual projects, explanations, so that we can actually share that with the other functional groups like finance and infrastructure and housing, so that they can understand more what a working landscape is, how that ties into our community, again, with particular emphasis on the triple bottom line. So with that, what did I do with my, I grabbed a brief little bio of Justin.
Are you going first?
Huh?
Are you going first?
It looks like it.
Okay. I didn't know whose presentation to put on, so.
Is that cool?
Yeah,
Are
that's
you
fine.
plugged in? You're
Yep.
okay. So this is Justin Wages. He's with the Placer Land Trust as well. I'm so happy to see that you guys have some board members and community members as well. Justin's the land manager, and he manages properties that Land Trust owns in fee title. He assists with general stewardship activities and coordinates the interactive use of our properties for education, outreach, and scientific research. Justin was hired in 2009 after a one-year internship with the organization.
And tons of
Take it,
volunteer
Justin.
work and contracting and part-time.
Tell us all about it.
Yeah. So most of you here are familiar with Placer Land Trust, yes or no? I just want to know how much of the basics I have to go through on this. So we are a nonprofit, 501(c)(3), and this is a little bit different than the normal presentations I do, because I normally do all the habitat restoration and that sort of thing. So feel free to ask questions. We don't have to wait till the end for a Q&A. I want to make sure we're going in the right direction. So we generally work with willing landowners to preserve, protect natural habitat as well as agricultural lands. We have two main mechanisms in which we accomplish that. Generally, the easy one is a fee title acquisition, where we work with the willing landowner to actually purchase a property. We own it in entirety, and then we have to manage it. And usually it's with some sort of funding partner, Trust for Public Land, Wildlife Conservation Board, private entities, that sort of thing. And then we manage it for whatever those conservation values are, whether it's view sheds, wildlife, watershed protection, or specific species. The more complicated one, and the one that's a little bit more interesting for this group, is the role of easements in the form of a conservation easement or an agricultural conservation easement. And this is where a landowner wants to, in a nutshell, sell off the development rights of their land. And they want to stay on that land and continue to farm it, ranch it, or just live on it. And most of the value of that land is tied up in the development potential. But most of these individuals don't want to see it developed. They want to keep that land in its present condition in perpetuity. Maybe they want to pass it on to their children, that sort of thing. So that's a really unique way to be able to preserve those values, whether it's habitat or agricultural, and then they get to stay there. We don't have to manage it, which is pretty good. A lot of times the landowner can take better care of their property because they're on it all the time. And essentially they receive some type of like a tax incentive or a cash incentive for doing that. There are instances where a farmer may want to go organic. That can be quite expensive and difficult to do when you're competing with people who aren't organic. By putting some type of an ag easement on their land, like Natural Trading Company did with Placer County, they're able to invest in the infrastructure required to go organic and be competitive. So that's a really useful tool that we have in being able to preserve these lands and kind of keep our cultural heritage going. We have a number of ag easements, like say through the Darrell Oast family. I think they've been here 150 years, and they have to continually sell off little pieces of land to be able to pay the tax note, you know, or whatever may come up. And in this case, now his land is fragmented. He can't run cattle from one end to the other anymore, although Highway 49 kind of messes that up a little bit. But by putting these ag easements on there, now his grandchildren and children will be able to continue farming it forever. And a lot of these lands are fairly large, so they have awesome habitat benefits as well, besides the ranching aspect. So this is just a quick little map that it's kind of hard to read, but it shows a lot of our preserved properties. The green are fee title properties, meaning we own them outright. You get in here your Auburn as you go up 49. This is the Bear River. And then the purple fuchsia, or whatever that color is, are our easements. And so those are privately owned, either, for instance, like City of Roseville, developers own that, private owners here. So our main focus is essentially watershed protection, obviously the working landscapes, and the wildlife habitat, and it's great because a lot of those aren't mutually exclusive. One piece of land may just have a larger focus than another. But if you look at wildlife habitat and watershed protection, in this area at least, because of our invasive species problem and that sort of thing, you can't have this and have it nice without making it a working landscape. We pretty much need some sort of livestock or some other activity to be able to manage a lot of the invasive species and create the habitat that we need for them. So again, some basic examples. Our Ravine Preserve, 427 acres, just outside of Lincoln. It was a mitigation property for some development that happened in Roseville that didn't get the proper permitting, so they were ordered to mitigate for those lands. Being the local land trust, we were essentially given a couple of the properties, but we have to manage them in perpetuity for whatever those mitigation values are. In this case, it was for vernal pool habitat and for Swainson's hawk foraging habitat. So if you know anything about vernal pools and Swainson's hawk for foraging habitat or any other raptor, you can't have tall grasses. Well, that property is like 90% Medusa head, which is a nasty non-native grass. And when we got it, the grasses were so thick with the old matter, which we would call thatch, all the little rodents could just run around in little tunnels above ground. Raptors can't get to them. It's also bad for vernal pools. The more vegetation you have around vernal pools, the more water gets sucked up out of those pools. And with shallow pools, they dry down quick. The listed species, like the fairy shrimp, can't finish their life cycle quick enough before those pools dry out. So they've done studies to find, yeah, you know what, we have to have cattle grazing. Now, I'm not a full advocate of cattle grazing in all situations, but in this case, it's an excellent tool for us. One of the other benefits of that is then we're going to get income from that ranching activity, which is really nice, because that would then fund my activities out there or my work, or I can go above and beyond and enhance that habitat using volunteers, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, whatever, put up boxes for birds and restoration activities. Up here, close to Auburn Valley Golf Course, we have our Harbago Bear River Preserve, used to be known as Bruin Ranch. And it's another working landscape up in the Oak Woodland areas. So, and then the Oast Ranch, we got more now, but when I made this one, this was the first one that we did. No public access, and it's privately owned, and he manages it. We drew up an easement where we could all agree that the activities on there are not going to harm the habitat values, and they're still beneficial for his ranching values. Basic things we work with as far as land management is concerned, and this is kind of the biggie when we own a piece of land, is you got to take care of it. And as many of you know, is in this area, we have a lot of invasive species that just take over, and they'll ruin your ecological values. They can really harm your farming or ranching opportunities there. Like say you get a field full of Medusa head or star thistle, your grazing value tanks. It's just not good for livestock. So now that you can't raise as many head of livestock on 1 acre of land that's filled with that stuff than you could if it was filled with better foraging species. So there's economic incentives to do this, as well as fuel load reduction, which is real huge because most of these lands, we have neighbors. And we don't want fires running through our properties and catching a neighbor's property on fire, or really anybody on fire, because then, fire departments, CAL FIRE, and everybody else, where does all that money come from? From us, taxpayers. So we try to be good neighbors and make sure we get rid of all that stuff. We also try to do any type of restoration activities, particularly riparian, anything that can help with flooding, flood mitigation, or erosion control, things like that, and for salmon habitat, particularly down in the lower zone, lower valley area. And one we don't really think about too much is the trail building and enhancement. Just seems like kind of a fun thing for most people, get people out there, it's community fun. But it has a big economic impact because where are these people, where are they gonna buy their gear? So they go to the local stores, they, pack up their lunches, bring in people from, other counties and other areas to utilize these trails. That's another economic benefit that sometimes, we don't think about. This just kind of shows some of the trails and recreation areas that we're planning, which Jim has a really big hand in right now in trying to get these connector trails through Hidden Falls Regional Park, which most of you are familiar with, and a lot of the other lands that we either own or have easements on up here in the Bear River area. So when those are completed, it's going to be something like another 33 miles of trail?
Well, around 30 miles of additional trail over what's at Hidden Falls now.
Yeah, and that's tacking on to what Hidden Falls already has, so that's huge. A lot of opportunity, and hopefully it'll unburden the Hidden Falls parking lot a little bit. I don't know if anybody's been there on a weekend in the summer, but that place just gets ridiculous. So I just wanted to show this one on habitat enhancement a little bit because it ties in with the working landscape idea. This is on our Ravine Preserve. It's a restoration project I'm working on in partnership with NRCS, as well as the Fish and Wildlife Service Partners for Fish and Wildlife program, which is really great because these work with regular landowners. So anybody can apply for these types of grants. So if you have an individual that has 20 or 30 acres, they want to enhance it, but they only have, say, $10,000 to do something like that, they can run over to RCD or some entity like that to get the technical experience and apply for grants to be able to double that money. Maybe it's a 50% match, maybe it's a 75% match. They can turn that 10 grand into 20 or 30 grand and really get some good work done on the ground. So in this case, we partnered with them to do a little bit of riparian habitat enhancement down here. This is all grassland restoration. Get rid of all the Medusa head and the nasties out there, plant our native grasses and our native forbs. But what was interesting is when I started the project, I learned that UC Davis was doing bee studies, and they needed new sites to be able to do those bee studies. Well, I love honeybees, and I know that they're having big problems. So I started working with UCD, and they started checking on all the flower plantings here and monitoring it. And they knew I had to do grassland stuff down here, restoration. So we started working with UC Davis and Project 8SM, which is a nonprofit for beekeepers. And we came up with this grand idea of planting an acre full of test forbs to figure out what the bees most utilize and that's most healthy for them. The big idea behind this is we need more land for honeybees, whether it's to store boxes and more particularly to enhance their foraging habitat all year round, not just that quick spring bloom. So we're trying to find the species that can do that, and then they can take that further out. When these landowners apply for these grants, we'll have a species mix and be able to tell them how to do what they need to do to enhance that habitat for the honeybees. So little things like this, it ends up working out to where you're doing much greater good than just planting some flowers on this. It'll go that much further. So these are just slides of partnership. Most of the work done here, other than I get my Fish and Wildlife staff to come out and slave for me too, which is kind of fun.
Justin, is that U.S. Fish and Wildlife?
Yes.
Okay,
Sorry.
and how are you actually getting rid of the Medusa? Is it as labor intensive as I think it might be, or are you doing something?
No. It's in that situation we have to do disking. There are different ways to do it because this is not vernal pool habitat right there. These are already disturbed soils, otherwise I wouldn't disc. That's just a cost-effective way to do it, and I don't have to spray a bunch more herbicide.
And
So it's
that's
kind of the lesser of the evils.
Okay.
Yeah. Basically, all of our information comes from the growers, like Hedgerow Farms. They're experts in growing, grasses, and that's where we get all the grass seeds. And yeah, pretty much to paraphrase, John Anderson's opinions on it, you pretty much got to act like a farmer. Nuke the site, nuke it again, maybe, till it, depends on how you're going to do it, then you can plant. That's like 3 years of intensive labor to get rid of the weeds, otherwise your success rate is extremely low. So,
And you still have to stand up to
and then you still have to go through and either mow or herbicide. So,
And what is disking?
sorry, where you till,
Okay.
run it with a little disc. We do it real shallow though. We're not trying to rip up the ground. We just want to kill the plants that are on top. So we've done that for a number of years out there, and we're trying to test these things. So a lot of this, I call it my learning landscape because we're testing out so many different things, like Placer County and their oak regen plans for the PCCP. We have different methods of planting oaks out there and trying to see how they work. And I've been blessed with 3 years of drought. So I can tell you what not to do at this point before we start spending a bunch of money. And I have an endless supply of Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, AmeriCorps members, just these great people who are always willing to help out. So.
Oh, isn't it enough?
One more question. I assume
Sorry.
you haven't used fire. You haven't. That's not an option.
It's a great tool.
Okay.
It's just a little hard to get permitting, especially in our area because we're right at that foothill and you get those inversion layers and air quality control. It's a little hard to get permitting, and timing is critical when you're trying to manage for things like Medusa head or star thistle. You have to hit it. You've got about a 3-week window at the most. And if you wait too long trying to wait on that call to say, yeah, you can do it, you've lost your window, and now you've lost an entire year worth of treatment. So that's why at that point it's like just call up my local rancher and say, get out here with your tractor.
Isn't finding competitive good species, say like subterranean clover, that will outcompete the invasives?
That's what we try to do, is make sure the species are going to be competitive. So if you have a field full of star thistle, purple needlegrass is always a good alternative, other than it's god-awful expensive at between $35 and $44 a pound, and you need about 4 to 6 pounds per acre. It creates a real deep root system, so it's real good for competing with star thistle once you get it in. So we do try to make sure that our seed mixes are good for the spot, the soil types, and going to be somewhat competitive, but your weed control is paramount. So there's almost no other way around it. And then your follow-ups.
Do goats not eat those things? I thought they ate everything.
Goats can, yeah, especially like star thistle.
I was going to say, I thought they actually kind of liked
Yeah,
star
and if you have the money, I don't mean to knock on organic methods of control, because goats and sheep can actually be excellent.
Yeah.
Sheep can be taught to eat it as well. And then sheep are nice because they're intermediate. They'll eat grasses and they'll browse. Whereas goats are mainly browsers until they starve, and then they'll just eat tires and stuff. But the problem is it's expensive. So I worked with Fish and Wildlife this morning on a project at Ophir School that they're trying to figure out how to get rid of blackberry. And they're working on, I think, was it 3 acres? And not all of it was overgrown. It was going to cost them $2,500 to graze it with the goats. Problem is the goats don't get rid of all the canes. They're just going to defoliate and eat little, tendrils. But I've seen what they do, and they leave the canes behind. You can't get in there to do any restoration. Now, if you were going to do a multi-year project for cities and other agencies where you have like right-of-ways or things, and you're not going to do any restoration right away. Sacramento River, I've seen them do it out there, and they do a pretty good job. Goats are great. And it's less expensive for those municipalities to be able to do that. But for the average Joe Schmo, if you're going to bank on 3 years of grazing out there at $2,500 per trip, and you may have to do that twice a year, that's pretty expensive compared to hand labor and herbicide.
Even if there's only that 3-week window, that's critical?
Well, in blackberry, no.
Oh,
Blackberry,
that's right.
you could, yeah, you
Right,
have
right.
a lot of leeway. The other stuff, yeah, you wouldn't be able to get enough animals out there. If you see what Lee Hazeltine does out here in Rockland,
Mhm.
Lincoln area, and you got 2,000-3,000 head of sheep and goat, that's great. They can do a wonderful job out there, but that's a lot of money.
It is, okay.
Yeah, and the timing. We've had problems where if you're not one of those premier contracts, they may not get out there in time. So, or not have enough animals. So now you have 5 or 6 star thistle, in a little 10-foot area. That's going to reseed. Whereas if you came through and mowed it, you got it. So, and you could do it anytime you want. So there's pros and cons.
Yeah.
I like the idea of the organic method. It keeps people employed, get animals out there, you get the droppings. But it's not perfect for every situation. And in situations where you have large landscapes, it's problematic and they're not selective. So when I have my,
City of Lincoln's budget for grazing is $200,000.
yeah, it's a lot.
Wow.
It's great, that they're out there and doing it, because you can't really mow that stuff, but yeah, there's a time and a place for the grazing. Just on our project, it wasn't going to work out real well, so we need to do the disking, plus turning over the soil, so we can release new seeds, water it, get them to sprout, and boom, you can knock them down. So these are all of my little partners helping out with a lot of stuff. You see Boy Scout troops, that sort of thing. So another one, just real quick with Auburn School Park. You guys are probably familiar with that, just up the road over there with High Street, College Way. I thought this was pretty cool because the garden is finally up and running now. We're working with the garden manager to try to figure out keep it sustainable. How can we keep it going in perpetuity? So it's a work in progress, but I really like the idea of having it up there because we bring in the high school students here, like a special needs class. But it could be a real good teaching tool for teaching ag in this area without having to make them go on a barn or farm tour or something like that. It's just right in our backyard. So I can take classes out there and teach them about the daylighting of the stream section and restoration and all that. It's just a nice little short walk. So as long as you don't have the high school kids out there smoking up and blowing smoke in your face, then it's pretty pleasant. That's another
So do
problem
you
we'll
work with
work
the
on.
police department that's right next door?
Yeah, and they actually have, the high school now monitors it. They have a little golf cart that drives around
Oh,
during
perfect.
lunchtime. So yeah, we were not pleased with that activity.
I bet.
But we also had Boys and Girls Club come out, and one of our help essentially bought them a box, or at least paid for it for a year. The kids came out, we gave them a presentation. I mean, they'd never done any of this kind of stuff in their lives. They'd never even touched a seed. And here they were mucking around in there and making sure everything was nice and wet, and they had to do the little rows, and they were planting their lettuce, that they had grown in their school. And it's small, but who knows how it's going to impact, each one of those little kids. And I thought the cutest thing is that the majority of them, the biggest reason they wanted to do it, because they wanted to make sure that the produce they grew would go to families in need. That was pretty awesome. So we had a homeless family, 2 kids, and a guy and his girlfriend or fiance living on one of our preserves in a tent last year. And we tried to help them out a little bit, and he ended up getting a place to live, and, they're making do now, and they're going to go out and harvest the lettuce probably here in another couple weeks. So it's kind of neat, the community connections that go along with those landscapes, even if they're small. So I don't know what kind of time I have, but I just kind of made a list of some of the incentives that go along with our working landscapes. So, some of the economic incentives, we obviously get grazing income. The better the forage and the larger the landscape, the more money you can get for the grazing income. So instead of us having to pay someone to graze it, they pay us. And so that goes a long ways towards making that management activity sustainable. And then we can go above and beyond and do things like oak regen restoration. which may not be in an endowment budget for us to do that, but that grazing revenue really helps to allow us to buy those materials or bring people in to do it. Reduces land management costs. I can't go around and mow 400 acres, so that would be really expensive. It's also not good with all the carbon in the air. So, fencing is extremely expensive. If you guys have property, it's somewhere around $450 to $550 a foot. So you can easily rack up, $500,000 just in fencing on some of our properties. And the ranchers in their contracts are supposed to upkeep that fence. So that helps us in the long run. There is the potential in the future for carbon credit that's with oaks, conifers, as well as soils. And the grazing has actually been shown to enhance soil sequestration, or carbon sequestration in soils, so that's kind of a bonus. Hopefully they'll get some numbers attached to that soon. We can also get financial assistance in the form of ag-related grants, whether it's riparian fencing to keep livestock out, and then watering infrastructure, those sort of things, and or enhancements to that landscape, like putting in more native grasses, forbs, like the clovers and stuff, which are excellent for grazing, nitrogen fixing, that sort of thing. We also get the ecosystem service incentives, and there's tons of those, but these are the kind of the basic ones there. And I threw in the learning landscapes as well, because we find that a lot of these universities, they just need places to do those studies, and it helps them to do things on the cheap. And if we're getting something useful out of it in the end to inform us how better to manage our landscapes or our livestock, all the better. So some of the community economic incentives, we're allowing access to grazable farmable lands. Land is at a premium for grazers. I have just a list of people that want more land to graze. People can't even get into the grazing business anymore because there's just no place for them to do it. So that's kind of, it's a nice way to keep the heritage and cultural aspects going.
I should have asked you guys this before, but how do you do that? Do you take bids for certain contract lengths for your different properties in terms of how you decide who gets the grazing contracts?
It really depends. A lot of them had been grandfathered in. When we got the land, they were already there. But once their contract is up, if we think they've been doing a great job, we allow them then the ability to renew if our terms are met. We haven't had to go out to bid. Public agencies or federal, state, they do have to go through a bidding process. We can't provide an economic benefit, so we'd have to actually be at market rate or within that, assuming what they're going to do management-wise is acceptable. But yeah, we haven't had to go to bid. We know who can do a good job, and that's our first priority. Money's not. So in some cases, I need a lot of work on some of the landscapes, and they get a pretty good deal because they know that I say, you know what, I gotta have Boy Scouts, 70 of them coming out to camp next weekend. Can we put the cows in the lower section? And they do it. So that's one way. Obviously, it keeps our local economy by having local foods, available. Most of our stuff is ranching, but we are doing a little bit more with the farm stuff and trying to help them out, and even the bees. Just having those, that's huge for our industry. So especially the almonds. I don't know if you've seen the numbers on those, but does it take something like 80 or 85% of the nation's bee population just to pollinate our almond crops? To me, that's insane. You get job creation, food security, cleaner air, cleaner water, cultural preservation, mostly in the form of ranching heritage or farming heritage. That's what we're big with here. And again, learning landscapes. So, we may have people from UC Davis, Berkeley, SFREC up in Browns Valley. They came out and actually harvested Medusa head for a study. I thought that was pretty cool. And he said, do you have any Medusa head? And I said, man, I got 400 some acres. Take all you want. So there are a lot of benefits that go along with it. And I think some of these are just kind of extra. And these just go along with the tours, bringing people out for the education aspect of it. And then working with the kids is a real big one that we're involved with. And because of the work we get done, it doesn't stray from our mission. But it's amazing how you can touch these little kids' lives and what they're going to do with that knowledge. Because if you ask pretty much anybody that has anything to do with conservation, ag, those sorts of things, they didn't start off living in a flat in New York City and never touch anything green. Most of them were like us, like me, running around in creeks and catching crawdads and, you know, playing in fields. That's what we need to get the kids out to do. Otherwise, you know, we're going to run out. And that's pretty much it.
Great. Excellent.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
All right.